All right, well, welcome everybody to the Oregon Community Rights Network's Wednesday webinar. Appreciate everyone being here tonight. Tonight's topic is titled, Does Law Influence the Culture, or Does Culture Influence the Law? So we're going to dig into that particular question. We have three really amazing people that I've gotten to know, two of them more recently, one I've known for quite some time, but I'm absolutely 100% certain we're going to have a great conversation with our three guests. And we'll also have time after we've had our conversation with our guests to open up questions to those here tonight. So if you have questions at any point as we're presenting here, as we're discussing things, just feel free to throw your questions, your comments in chat, and we'll get to them after a little while of conversation with our featured guests tonight. So I'm going to do a quick introduction of each, and then we'll just kind of dive into it. Joining us from Los Angeles is artist Andrea Bowers. She has been recording and amplifying the work of activists presenting and past for more than 2 decades now. Her multimedia practice foregrounds the experience of the people who dedicate their time and energy to the struggle for gender, racial, environmental, labor, immigrant justice, and those who are directly affected by systemic inequality. Her most recent shows, or actually it's a current show right now, exists, Flourish, and Evolve, which is at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Cleveland. Andrea's also been represented by, how do I pronounce this, Andrea? Vielmeter?
Vielmeter.
Vielmeter in Los Angeles?
Vielmeter in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Krebs, Andrew Krebs in New York. Jessica Silverman in San Francisco, Kaufman Repetto in Milan, and Capitan Pazzo in Berlin.
So as you can see, Andrea has been on display and exhibited in different parts of the world through her, as she would say, I think, her kind of fusion of activism and art. And we'll get more into that here in a little bit. Joining Andrea is Megan Rich. She is the executive director for the Museum of Contemporary Art in Cleveland, where she has been for 19 years. Prior to that, she worked as a curatorial education, engagement, and strategic initiatives. She strives in her work to use empathy, creativity, humility, and humor to help improve our society through art, ideas, and action. So welcome, Megan, here tonight. Thanks for staying up late for us. And then last but not least, we have the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund's Consulting Director, Tish Odell. For the last 10 plus years, Tish has been involved in community rights and rights of nature work, starting in her own community of Broadview Heights, Ohio, which led to the adoption of Ohio's first Home Rule Charter Amendment, creating a community bill of rights banning fracking and recognizing the rights of nature. She's then gone on to work with dozens of communities in Ohio on anti-fracking, anti-pipeline, rights to livable climate, fair and free elections, and water privatization issues. Today, Tish works with communities all over the country and internationally, and most recently, as a few years ago, assisted people in Toledo with their efforts to pass the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, which is a big reason why we're here tonight, which was the first law in the United States dealing with a specific ecosystem and recognizing the inherent rights of those ecosystems. Tish has also been a chief lecturer for CELDF's democracy schools, as well as being heavily involved in the Ohio Community Rights Network, which is a sister network to the Oregon Community Rights Network. So Tish, welcome as well from the deep East Coast, 3 hours ahead of us here on the West Coast. So appreciate the three of you being here tonight. As I mentioned, the title of kind of gathering us tonight is, again, does law influence the culture, or does culture influence the law? And I thought before we kind of really dive super deep into that and kind of pull that apart in some different ways, wanted to see what the three of you would throw into the audience here around how did this even come to be? Like, how did an LA artist connect with a museum director in Cleveland with, you know, someone doing activist work based out of a group in Pennsylvania? I mean, what brought the, you know, I guess the three of you together and sort of this convergence of the conversation of culture and art and law, and you know, in some ways also, where has it gone since this kind of first connections between the three of you. So whoever wants to jump in, feel free, and we'll kind of roll from there.
Megan, I was wondering if you could talk about the show that how I was first invited, because it started
100%.
with an invitation from moCa Cleveland, and they asked me to consider a project. So do you want to talk about that, Megan?
Yeah. So I think it's worth noting that Andrea might be an LA girl, but she's Midwestern born and raised. So we claim her as our own, despite her very cosmopolitan existence now. So 5 years ago, roughly, almost, we had a chief curator who had come to moCa not long earlier and was planning an exhibition, a group exhibition that was called F as in Frank. And the exhibition was premised on the idea of looking at candor in contemporary art, and through special projects by artists that Courtney Finn is her name, who now is at the Orange County Museum of Art. So those of you on the West Coast have an opportunity to see some of her projects more readily than us in the Midwest. And Andrea was one of 5 artists that Courtney had invited to participate in this exhibition and to explore topics of personal interest or of artistic interest that would tie into this notion of how do we be honest and frank in the relationship of art to our world. And did you, so this is where I'm a little cloudy, Andrea. Did you say that you knew, did we do the introduction? Because I wasn't in that original conversation.
Right. So being from Ohio and growing up on the lake and having constantly in my practice working with climate justice activists, environmental activists, I have a methodology that's part of my practice. Whenever I get invited to a show, I ask the institution, because I think it's important to almost you all do it and if you're comfortable with it, but to ask an institution to research all of its local activists from a specific subject matter, and then to bring that to me. And then when I come to visit, can we have meetings with these people? So, I mean, we went over to Kelly's Island or Put-in Bay. Yeah, Put-in Bay. We met different people, but when Tish came in, I was like, oh, I'm in love with her. Can I please work with her? It just clicked, and it was so exciting. But so it was this idea. Part of my practice is that you don't just work with me, you collaborate with a local activist or organization or some sort of movement. So it started, with a willing museum team and a series of conversations. Tish, do you want to talk about that first meeting?
Well, yeah, I've been telling the story wrong all this time. Oh my God, yeah. I've been telling the story that you because you were connected to Lake Erie and you saw the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, and so you wanted to do the show on rights of nature.
Well, I mean, it was I knew about it, right? And I really wanted to focus on something dealing with the algae bloom, but I didn't know about you all, right? And it was that, I mean, I was sort of guiding them in what I thought they should research, but then it was reaching out to see what actually existed in the community. Right. And I did know about the Lake Erie Bill of Rights already, but it was really, I think, that meeting, because, you don't know if you can work with people or if, it's a big ask to say, I'd love to build a project and I don't know what it'll be and it'll have to evolve. Would you be willing to take this on? And I just really loved meeting you and learning about CELDF,
That's when I got the email. Yeah, that's when I got the email from moCa Cleveland. It was somebody from moCa Cleveland, and they were saying, well, this artist, Andrea Bowers, wants to meet you. And I was like, I don't know who Andrea Bowers is, and I don't know what moCa stands for, and I don't know what art has anything to do with our work as a public interest law firm. So yeah, that's where I always pick up the story and go, thank
But
God
you
this is
said
okay." No,
yes.
yes.
But you said yes. We just assume like, yeah, just ask. What do they mean? Don't you want to meet with an artist? Doesn't that sound fun? I mean, let's just get it done. So, and you said yes.
Mhm. Yeah. And
And
then you
life
were
has
there
never been the
we
same.
met in person, I think, the first time, didn't we? It wasn't even via Zoom, I think, yeah.
No, we met sitting
Zoom.
inside at a conference table, sitting inside the museum. And I had my brother with me, who's an environmental scientist, because he drove me, because he's living in Ohio, right? Because my family's from there. But I think that it's not so easy as an artist to just do that. Like, I've been developing artistic practices to collaborate with institutions and thinking about best practices, looking at things like community organizing strategies, which is what you are, right? And also trying to understand where my skill sets lie and where they don't, because you all are much better at things than I am, right? So it's also about asking how I can be of service and what maybe I could do for you, and also trying to figure out like different ways to do things than the obvious ones in a certain way, right? And also, creating ties, because I'm going to come in and out of museums and galleries and art exhibition spaces and institutions, and the work's only going to be up for a certain time, and then I'm going to leave. But can I make ties that bind once I'm gone? Like, that's what I'm hoping happens with you all, that you all continue to find ways to collaborate. Like, we still need to do this democracy school, for instance. I want to do that somewhere. I want to continue that, and I want to do other things, but I think, finding and I mean, Megan's amazing and the institution's amazing, but not all institutions are comfortable. Art institutions are comfortable with this type of subject matter, or working with such an opinionated, right? Like with activist groups, right? And so sort of doing that as part of my practice, I think it also kind of introduces doing that with an institution. And I think it can cause important institutional change in terms of what can be done, as like public programming and stuff like that.
Well, you
But
guys, I mean, you found a way to do what you just described, Andrea. I mean, the three of you were just together physically in Cleveland, based on the fact of these convergence points, these overlapping points. How does the fuller system come together? And it was based on around your art exhibit that's currently at moCa, exists Flourish, Evolve. And from that, in the engagement Tish had with you and with Megan, started to explore, like, how do we do some of this? How do we take the artist world, the cultural world, the activist world, and other kinds of worlds, and bring them together in a way that's often not invited. We're kind of separated. And that emerged, this whole truth reckoning and right relationship with the Great Lakes, that had its part one in October of last year, which were the kind of the truth testimonies, and then part two that just took place. So I mean, thinking about that as kind of one of these examples, what have the three of you kind of carried from that part one experience, as well as the most recent part two experience, in the sense of, how you think about, collaborations and the convergence of culture and arts and relationship and law? Like, have things changed for the three of you, based on kind of going through that kind of next level, I guess, of coming together in consideration of those convergence points?
I mean, I'll let Tish talk about it, but I think I just want to say that I wasn't able to go to the first one, but the first one was at the Science Center. And then the second one was at moCa, Cleveland. But I literally went home thinking, like, for the first time in my life, I was like, this is the best thing that's ever happened in my practice, was that event. Like, it was just an amazing event that you all put on, and Tish did an exceptional job. And it was just mind blowing to me. And I really moved by the whole experience. So I was really proud that it could be associated with my exhibition. And it was very much Tish's doing. Like, I couldn't have organized that, right? So that's where it's a collaboration. So Tish, do you want to talk about that event or what you've learned from it?
Well, I was going to do broader, just working with the two of you. And I was going to say, of the three of us, I think I'm the one who like had the most evolving to do and the most growing. I mean, because you've obviously worked with activists before, and Megan, you've done that before, I think, you know, with the artists that you've brought in and exhibits at the museum. But for me, coming from the legal world and not being engaged with the art world, I've like grown so much because of this experience and both of you. I mean, I kept thinking of all this, you know, the comparisons and like how the law can be really complicated at times, but so can art. And they both could be taken really simply and at face value too, right? And how art is open to interpretation, and contrary to what we're taught about the law, it too is very open to interpretation, as we've seen in so many of our community rights and rights of nature cases. And then I was thinking about how both art and the law can evoke really strong emotional responses. You know, although I would venture to guess that art probably evokes more positive emotions than the law does most of the time, you know, but both are ways, I think, you know, in our culture to share ideas, thoughts, and make connections. And both have the ability, I think, to create these shifts that you're talking about, Kai, you know, like in cultural thinking and changes in our communities that ultimately affect us. But I kind of missed that whole, you know, connection until this experience. So I'm really grateful, you know, that this all happened.
Hey, Tish, can you provide some context? You know, CELDF's been obviously trying to share out some sense of what took place physically, both in the testimony portion as well as, you know, more will come from the most recent gathering in April. But in sort of short form, can you describe sort of what the intent was here and sort of maybe physically what it looked like? Not, you know, in too
Right.
great of detail, but just a general sense for those that obviously were not physically there, but can get a better sense of what was going on.
Sure. Part of it too was we started out actually wanting to do a tribunal, which, you know, then we kind of shifted our thinking after working more with, you know, Andrea and Megan in the museum and that, and seeing that it's more, that keeps us in the realm of the legal world, a tribunal, right? Having that, those kind of characters there. So it evolved to the truth, reckoning, and right relationship. And the first part in October, we invited people, and it was intentional. We invited people from various like careers, professions, people with different, just community members as well, students, different age groups. We had a medical doctor, we had a Catholic nun, we had someone who worked for the EPA, we had an academic. I mean, all these different people we brought together to say, give your testimony, like be truthful and honest about your role in our culture and society and how it impacts the Great Lakes, nature, all those things. And so that was part one. And those recordings are up on CELDF's YouTube channel. We also had Indigenous people there, did a water ceremony because that was right by the lake, which I think that was very powerful. And we also have that video up. But then part two was the one that just happened, and that's at the museum, and that's surrounded by, you know, the art, Andrea's exhibit, and just the whole essence of being in an artistic, you know, museum. We invited people back to do a little bit more reckoning. It was 2 days, so we had activities, and it wasn't just people talking, us like talking heads telling people things. We wanted to build relationship with the people for 2 days, to see if they could actually reckon with the hard truths that were revealed in part one, and then kind of talk about, well, how do we actually get in right relationship? Because we know that what we have now isn't, whether it's the system, the law, our own cultural beliefs, and that we're part of this. It wasn't about assigning blame, but it was about being honest, starting from that point, and then building on that and looking at the art as part of it. And I mean, Andrea's film, if you get to see it, and we do have it uploaded, it's brutally honest, you know, about industrial agriculture and the big CAFOs in Northwest Ohio, and you know, who's
It's Frank, Tish.
Oh yeah, sorry, it's Frank. Sorry.
Megan, I'm wondering, like, before we kind of move on to maybe some other topics related, like in your, position that you're in, doing the work you do, being the person you are, I mean, what have you been hearing or feeling yourself, coming out of this event here, just around your world? Like, is it kind of popping up here and there, or kind of people seeing things a little differently? I mean, what's been the impact, if anything, coming out of the Truth and Reckoning and Right Relationship events? You're on mute, Megan.
Of course, can't learn. This is part of our vision and our mission, which our actual vision, which we just updated in January, is that art and artists lead us to the unfamiliar, where we open and connect to new possibilities. And so opening and connecting to new possibilities, we try and affect that through the exhibitions proper. So the artwork, the way we offer interpretation, and we guide visitors through their art experience, but then also through programming that allows the art to lead to more dialogue and exploration and deeper dives. And so this was really kind of an apex moment of that happening, kind of firing on all cylinders. Andrea is a master of using the seductive qualities of aesthetics and art to draw in people who get kind of like surrounded by her practice, and then suddenly are like, I'm inside an idea that's activist and I got to deal with it now. And so there's something real, like the neon behind you, Kai, and the words behind Tish, and then this neon behind me. Even the film, like there's just a way that you're drawn in. And I think the way that the program worked, where we started with the truth, and then led into the reckoning and right relationship, allowed a kind of like measured movement. And I think for our staff, for the people that were there, but also the visitors who are kind of like opening up as they move through space, or as they spend, extended amount of time watching the film, there's absolutely awareness being built. There's a ton of questions around what is this CELDF? Like, what do they do? And the fact that the drawings of the Bill of Rights is a drawing, and so people get sucked into the fact that it's a drawing, and then they're reading the words so closely where they might otherwise gloss over them. We talk a lot about the ways in which we can kind of use that as entry points. So it's been really meaningful. And I have to say, coming out of this, we have 2 more years coming up where every winter season we're addressing environmental justice. And it's just like, now I think we're all kind of really turned on to the ways in which we can continue moving and motivating these relationships to further conversations and more work. So we're working with an artist next winter, spring, whose work is focused in this way. The following year, we're doing a group show of Ohio-based artists with CAC Cincinnati, which is another contemporary museum. And that whole show is focusing on environmental justice. So this is a building block for us to continue leaning into this topic, and hopefully continue to leverage the relationships toward the work.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of maybe blow it open on a bigger scale, I mean, with this idea of kind of reckoning with some really hard truths. I mean, it's overwhelming at times, and it's, of course, those who are tuned in, connected to it, they viscerally feel it, and it can be very paralyzing. And the system we have today, is very good at, diluting, dissuading, distracting those who see the truth and want to kind of dig in and actually try to do something on a very deep level. I mean, what are the three of you seeing, sensing, in the sense of this, potential convergence of, art and culture and activism to really actually undertake deep transformational change? I mean, are you feeling, I guess, good about it? Are you still feeling sort of anxiety about it? Are you feeling you're seeing opportunities? Is it all of it? I mean, yeah, we had an event. Yeah, we're doing our part to kind of feature things, but it's a big world out there. I mean, how is this all kind of unfolding for each of you, either in as you as individuals or through the organizations and institutions you're a part of?
I think being in the art world is really slow. We might prepare for a show that's going to happen in 2 to 5 years. And so everything I do is like also thinking about, well, some of the first artworks I made are still showing, and I'm 59 now, right? So I have to think about, what will this look like in 10 years? What will this look like in 20 years? What will this look like in 50 years? And so for me, this project is still really beginning, but I also don't try to make change on a large scale. I don't even try to think about that. I just try to think about doing my part. Like, how can the things I make be in service to the issues and be in service to CELDF? And then you find that through the process, I want to say that I think when you talk about law and culture and law and the influence, I think that, and I just learned this from an activist lawyer for the ACLU, Chase Strangios. And I just worked on a project with them, and what I realized was he was so frustrated because he's working on fighting all the trans hate bills throughout the United States. But I did a project, I was able to document and participate in a project with him that was about building community. It was a trans prom. And what he kept saying, and what I realized, and what I think happened for me, that's the most important thing, was the community building and the friendship and the love and the change that happened within that room. But also, like, we interviewed a group of farmers, right? And some of the sons were like on the fence with their politics. And the mom told me, who's in the film, that since we interviewed them, that he's become much more activated with his positions and his politics, and he's moved kind of like farther to the left, and he's much more concerned about the environment. So like, just us interviewing one family changed the thinking of some of the family members, and they live locally, right? And they are the people who can make change in their local community. And to me, and one of the people that showed up at the opening was someone who was renting their family land to the worst corporate CAFO, farm, in Ohio. And so I literally could say to him, you have to stop doing that. Like, you have to watch this documentary and you have to change your practices. So like, those are big changes to me, and the fact that every day Clevelanders have to deal with a 20-foot neon sign next to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that says Lake Erie has the right to exist, flourish, and naturally evolve. And Megan made that happen. There's no way a giant museum would have taken that on. Megan is magic. I can't believe she made it happen. And that sign is there, and it will continue to affect people's thinking, and they're going to ask, why is that there? What does it mean? Where does it come from? And it's going to introduce people constantly to rights of nature legislation. Yep. So, but I think it's the community building that's so amazing, and all of the people I've met, and we will continue to work on projects and do things together. And the issue, like, I just think it's, for me, it's been magical, and it's going to keep growing. Now we're like putting the film and apply, we want it to be in documentary or whatever, like film, what are they called, Megan? Film
festivals.
Thanks, you all. And I'm going to show the film here in Los Angeles. And, the rights of nature sign behind Megan has been already in like 3 or 4 shows. So this stuff I'll just keep pushing it, and hopefully, I don't know, that's how it was for me. So I don't know, Tish and Megan, if you want to respond.
Well, I was going to say, it comes back. I mean, I agree with you, Andrea, a lot, that it's about focusing on the people and the relationships. I mean, and this show has opened up, because before I was dealing mostly with communities that were with groups of people in the community that were very concerned about an issue that was happening, some harm, right? And that's, And so a lot of the work was formed, you know, around just that issue specific, and it was a lot of negative things. Not the fault of the people at all, but because they're so focused right on the harm that's coming. And so you're constantly, you know, either being told, no, you can't do it by the system, or you're bringing up more and more data and facts about all the harms that's happening. And what this exhibit has done is it's opened up talking to people, about other things. Just, it's like, how could we do it differently? It's allowed us to talk about, you know, or how does it impact you, but how could you, like, say the medical, like, just as one example, I got to talk at a medical summit here in Cleveland with the 3 big medical businesses, hospitals. And I would have never been able to do that. They wouldn't have had me come in if it wasn't for this art show, because your exhibits at moCa, and moCa holds weight in the community and all of that. And so it was focused more about, well, oh, wow, we're part of this problem too. And how could we do things differently? So it just kind of changed that whole thing. But the whole, you know, I was even thinking about your film and your work, your whole exhibit, Andrea. It's again, it's like the contradictions and the contrast. So you have a really beautiful piece next to then something that maybe does show the horrible harms, right? Like the algae, like in the, and how awful and thick it is, it's destroying the lake. But then it's next to one of your beautiful pieces, you know, of the woman in the water, or, you know, an art piece of nature that, you know, it's just this back and forth. And so I don't know. It's
But that's like my job as an artist, is to visualize a movement, right? Like to make the slogans compelling and to create visual points of interest to draw people in. Like, and it, you know, it's my job to try to follow the lead of activists, you know, and see what you all need, you know, and that will never change. Like sometimes I'll be like, Tish, you need new graphics. Can I do them? You know, and that's, I think, really important, as simple as that.
And so our job is the connection point between art and the artists and audiences through art. So art's our conduit, and it's our focus. So we're not an, you know, moCa is not by its nature and plus like an activist organization. We don't, you know, when we work with an artist, we don't suddenly become an environmental justice activism focused organization. But we're leveraging the art to have conversations that can lead to action through our partners or through the audiences that we serve. And an interesting example, actually, too, Tish and I both presented at the Cleveland Clinic summit, and I presented on just sort of the history of artists since we opened this building that I've worked with, whose work has focused on environmental justice. And I took them through this whole history, you know, ending with Andrea's project. And like several people came up afterward and they were just so excited about Andrea's work and so excited about wanting to connect more with the artists and with moCa. And when I went back to Tish and said, hey, I got all these cards and they asked about, and Tish laughed and she's like, oh my gosh, those people usually hate us. They almost work against us. And I'm like, right, well, because in this modality, suddenly, like, there's a new way of seeing your work, I guess. I mean, it's hilarious. And then I gave a tour to a director of a bank that is headquartered in Cleveland, and he, I would guess, maybe leans in a less activist, liberal way. But during the talk, he began to reflect on, he has a home in Chautauqua, which is a lake up in New York that a lot of our patron group go and spend time at in the summer. And he began to talk about how disgusting the lake is and how they're having all sorts of problems with Lake Chautauqua. And maybe we need to start thinking about like a right of nature for that lake, because what's going to happen to it if we don't protect it? And I'm like, yep. That's the thing. So it's like sometimes the art is what cracks it open. And even if it always has to be personalized. Everyone, you know, there's so many times people have to be able to personalize the connection points to really kind of have that crack open moment. But, you know, he's not going to sign up to be, you know, a CELDF volunteer. But he now is thinking like, I actually do have this body of water I care about, and I don't want it to die. And maybe I should care about it in a new way. And so I just, you know, the more that happens, you know, 25,000 people were at the Great Lakes Science Center for the eclipse. Do you know what they saw when the skies got dark? That neon. That's the only thing that was light, that was lit. during the eclipse, and all these people are staring at it. And then when they're like, what is that? There's a huge sign downstairs that says CELDF. Here's your link. Go learn about it. So it's just so much exposure toward the work that's happening. And that's really what we are hoping to offer and do in partnership with the artists and the organizations we work with.
So, I mean, I know Tish, you're kind of coming up to speed on sort of these elements of the power of culture, in this case specifically art, and how that is sort of I guess infused and invigorated maybe the possibility around activism work. And of course, Andrea, you coming from the artist background, Megan, you being in that position of the featuring and the connecting and the informing and the inspiring. I mean, what are the three of you seeing in a broader way? Like, how are people relating to art these days? Whether, it's the painting or the mural or sculpture, but we obviously live in a very, very digital age. Things are fast when it comes to kind of the visual world. Like, are you seeing good stuff? Are you seeing stuff that kind of worries you in the sense of how art's being used? I mean, like what is sort of that art activism kind of change world look like outside of what we were just talking about in the realm of, Andrea's work, and it's currently being featured at moCa and such. Like, what is, I guess, going on there from each of your perspectives?
I mean, I don't really know how to answer that because the art world there are many art worlds, I come out of a really specific history of, I went to school at a Cal Arts, which was considered a kind of Marxist institution. And I was taught by conceptualists and famous conceptualists and feminists. It was the location of the first feminist art program in the world. So, I have been, I'm not a traditional art maker. I think about ideas. I think about the art being in service of ideas. And that kind of thinking came out of the 70s. And then that led to art being in service of social justice, and I had a really famous teacher, Charles Gaines, who is a conceptualist and a very famous Black artist who's kind of changed the art world, I think, in terms of race relationships. So I feel, and then I studied under someone named Suzanne Lacey and taught in a program called, that was about social engagement, which is a form of practice that you've probably never even heard of, right? Like it's like a field like art, like painting or sculpture or drawing. There's a medium called social practice, which is like art as dialogue and building community organizing as art. And so I'm in such a specialized little area. Of course, I'm internationally, I exhibit all over, but I would say that especially since, COVID and Black Lives Matter, there are more and more young artists making work about activism or about political issues. And to me, that is like super, super exciting. And there's more institutions. I think like in the United States, decolonizing is happening in cultural institutions and has been since during COVID. And really, I think because of Black Lives Matter, the movement for Black lives. And I think that Megan can probably speak to this, but I think in terms of a lot of young artists and their commitment to change amongst younger people and younger artists, it's very exciting.
I would say one of my, I will sort of note a concern that I think art can address, but it does take some deliberateness. And that is that I often in Cleveland find myself in conversations on panels and in programs talking about the importance of art, the value of art to social change, to vitality, to health, to wellness. And I'm pretty much usually in a room with other artists, art leaders, or cultural professionals. And so, it becomes a lot of quite a bit of preaching to the choir. And I do think in some cases that one of the problems is that the conversations aren't happening enough outside of the art world, or isn't being done in such a way that some of the people who have the power to make certain changes aren't also kind of brought into those moments to have those experiences with art, with artists. So the connection, that the ways that Andrea's works with her practice, that also is integrally engaging with the organizations and the activists themselves in the process of making the work, is super effective because it's always tied together. I am skeptical of the power of activist art that is detached from kind of any specific action, or that is sort of just restating the problem, I guess I would say, without any nuance. I'm really excited about the concept of nuance right now, because I find that, extremist kind of superficial, simplified rhetoric doesn't really get to the complexity of the problems and where we can actually start to find solutions. And so I think there's an obligation for us as an institution to work with artists who understand how to approach their political work with nuance, or help, or we can approach our interpretation of that work with more nuance, because the fact is that is the way that you start that conversation with someone who is skeptical. And we are constantly dealing with skeptics. I mean, we are a contemporary art museum. So like, people walk through our doors all the time and they're like, what is this shit? Sorry. But like, I'm going to hate it. I'm going to hate it. It's going to be a bunch of black boxes on a wall. It's going to be awful. And so we're already starting from a point of skepticism. So what we know is like, there's a lot of finessing that has to happen. And the best artists working in these kind of modalities understand how to finesse the aesthetics of their work to actually, go deeper into an effective kind of strategy to make change, even at the individual level.
Yeah, that sets up another question, I think, for the three of you. Does law influence culture? Does culture influence law? What happened here is you had this just amazing convergence of, the artist, the institution to kind of feature that, the organizing law firm to come together. And, it just turned out to be this kind of a amazing experience that is, still reverberating, still rippling out, still having its impacts, which I think all of us were hoping that it would be like that. But as we look at others that are here from different communities, what are other avenues for people to explore this question? How would, if you have any advice at all, like how do people go about that in the places where they're at, to have these kind of provocative conversations, to face the truths based on where you're at, that doesn't require, hosting a multi-day event, with an internationally known artist in an amazing, museum in a urban environment kind of thing. Like, I think the three of you see that there's something here that doesn't require those specific things, but like, what are maybe some ideas, some steps, some suggestions, some possibilities where these same kind of conversations can be happening in other places that then lead to something substantive? If you've been thinking about that at all, I guess it's maybe I don't know. Just curious to see if you have any thoughts in regards to that.
I mean, on a really simple level, I always think that like, I'm always being asked to come in to talk with activists, and they're really excited to work with artists or activist groups. Like I did a dinner recently with vote.org, and there was another couple of groups, but I kept saying like, but what do you need me to do? Like, don't just invite me in to invent something. You know what I mean? Because I think that artists, sometimes we need assignments. Like on a really simple level, if there's something you need, ask local artists for help and give them an assignment. We're really good at assignments. You know, don't make it big, just give us an assignment and we'll help out and allow the relationships to evolve from these sort of simple requests. And then it'll bloom into something that you didn't expect.
Yeah, I think that's really a good piece of advice, Andrea, because again, this idea, like I never thought of that before, right? Like that's something I would have never considered like doing. But it's again that idea now that I know the law and that they're so good at stifling and shutting down new ideas because the system's set up and it likes the way it's functioning and working, right? So they shut our ideas down. So it's about sharing ideas. And so yeah, like if an artist can come up with a creative way to take the idea that you want to share with more of the community members, you know, I like that, you know, you contact and say like, okay, here's the problem. You bring them into the conversation and like, how do we get more people in the community aware of this and bring them into the conversation? How do we get them to come? Because so many times I hear from the community, you know, like nobody will come to our events. We can host a town hall and tell all these facts and horrible things, but people don't come. So yeah, how do we make it a different kind of event and something that people will want to come and participate in and start that relationship building to build community?
And I think artists are really good at that. Like, let's do a cool creative event, but still get this content across. But also, you know, activists have to remember what they're good at, right? Community organizers have to remember what they're good at, because we're not. Most of us are trained to go into a studio and be by ourselves and make things, right? And the other thing that I think a lot about is like, instead of it being about my subjectivity or elusive and hard to understand, like the best compliment I can have is like, your work is so didactic. People say that to me as a criticism all the time. And I'm like, thank you. I'm trying to make it didactic because I don't want it to be confusing, right? I want it to be as clear as possible so that people can get the messages as clearly as possible. But yeah, Tish, I think that's how it works, right? And it's got to come from both sides, and also both sides respecting each other and understanding that you're peers and one person isn't better than the other. It's just different skill sets. And how do we bring those skill sets together and use conversation to solve these problems?
Plug for the art organization, and that can be the conduit.
Yeah.
Artists are special creatures and they're wonderful. And they also, as Andrea just alluded to, also sometimes have very specific ways that they like to work and things that they do best. And sometimes what they don't do best is sit in a meeting and like communicate very effectively and make a plan that's gonna, you know, so our expertise is artists and audiences. And so if you have an arts organization in your area, my recommendation is also to let them be a conduit for you to do some translation as necessary. We did a series of town halls for a few years that were created by artists who made an entire, first a super PAC and now a 501c3. And it was deliberately upending the notion of the town hall as just something where, you know, civic leaders get up and debate. It was always with artists as the main speakers, and it was in the round, and the topics were mixing culture and politics, and it was at the museum in most cases. And so we were able to disrupt some of the status quo, but to Andrea's point, keep it fairly didactic. So it didn't become so metaphoric and so poetic and so lyrical that it becomes unreal and idealistic. Like it has to stay grounded in some measure of truth and practicality, or people who are, you know, uncomfortable with the cultural perspective or artist perspective will see it as like imaginary. And so there has to be a balance there, I think, in order to make it truly effective for people who aren't thinking the way artists think, which is most of us actually.
No, that's great. No, I kept thinking about what you said, Megan, earlier about the, you know, the banker coming from, you know, the banker's world and finding this connection because of the art to then think about the community, then think about policy, right? Like just think about that, you know, almost like the river, right? This kind of meandering sort of arrival at something that if you would have came at it strictly from, let's say, a policy consideration standpoint, it may not even been accepted. It could have been, you know, vehemently rejected, right? And so I find that very fascinating as you guys have been talking. If the three of you are okay, we can maybe shift to see if there are some questions. I see Tori, you've had your emoji hand up there if you want to levy a question to the three guests here.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate the conversation so far. My name's Tori Biles, and I'm from California, Morro Bay in California. I've been an activist for about 25 years. But my question, and kind of tagging on Kai's question towards the three of you about the connection between art and law and policy. But I'm wondering if art can, what do you think of the function of art in terms of opening the aesthetic appreciation for nature to people? I mean, part of the environmental problem is sort of just this industrial utilization of the environment, this attitude towards the environment as being just a source of resources. It's nothing aesthetic. It's just we want to use the environment. But if you create a aesthetic appreciation and look at it, that's where you start changing people's attitudes towards what nature is all about. That's the kind of thing that I think is a real powerful shift between people. And it's sort of tying into, we can have this aesthetic relationship to nature, not just a utilitarian one.
Thanks, Troy. Does anyone want to jump in on the question there?
I mean, I just would like to say something about aesthetics. Tori, I spent part of my childhood and still do in San Luis Obispo. So we'll have to get together sometime.
Well, yeah, good. Right.
I first of all, I wanted to say that for me, aesthetics is a tool and not an end result. And that the most important thing I do as an artist is use my voice. I always think about if I've got because people only look at an artwork in general for, I think it's 2.5 seconds. That's the average view. Right. Which is really a frustrating thought, but it's also if I have only a couple seconds to say something, what do I want my art to say? And what I want my art to say, for instance, is stop polluting the Great Lakes, give the Great Lakes the right to exist, flourish, and naturally evolve. I am going to use aesthetics to say that, but the first thing, the most important thing I have as an artist is a voice. Art is a form of communication, right? And you can make something pretty and quote beautiful, but if it doesn't say something, it's useless and won't change anybody's thinking. So you can't separate aesthetics from voice. And so the idea, the message is number one, and the tool are aesthetics. The other thing is I don't believe in universal aesthetics. I believe that what is beautiful, I think, I've been trying to think about decolonizing aesthetics for a really long time, right? And aesthetics is, I think about the vernacular of aesthetics, or the vernacular of beauty, and how to use it, and that people, it's of the moment, and it's something that people agree might be beautiful, but it might change over time. So I'm just trying to rethink all of that stuff in terms of aesthetics.
Good. Thank you. That makes sense. I hear you.
But I'm always using a vernacular beauty to try to change people's thinking, I make agitprop. But it's all about beauty.
Speaking of beautiful objects that Andrea makes, I see her wall of ribbons, and I have 2 ribbons that I got of Andrea's when I was in New York at one of her installations that say clean water, healthy land, and protecting nature is not a luxury, which I painstakingly selected these 2 ribbons out of hundreds. I was choosing, my engagement ring or something, but these are beautiful objects, and I have them and I hold them when I'm working at my desk, and I look at their statements and they remind me of things to do with, the purpose of her work, and they're free. Best art. I'll say, you know, the challenge with portraying nature is, I think for art, how are you going to beat that? Like, how are you going to make something more beautiful than nature? Like, what a horrible, I feel like there's a story of like an impressionist that like went mad trying to portray the beauty of nature and with absolute repetitive failure. So in some way, you know, I strenuously agree with Andrea that beauty, if it's just pretty, it's very unmemorable. And that doesn't mean you don't want to live with it. It doesn't mean like it's not worth having somewhere that just brings you joy when you look upon it. But if you're talking about work that's going to move you, there's got to be something else in there. And it can be the idea, it can be the technique, it can, you know, there can be a combination of things, but nature is a persistent and will forever be a persistent topic and subject matter for artists. But the question is, one of the best things that happened at the summit was we had to try and define nature, and like, oh my God, talk about a futile exercise. Like our team, I think Kai, where you at? Like by the time we got done, we were like, well, it's everything in the universe and everything, all the microbes in our guts and everything in the middle. So at some point, you know, I think that it is valuable for organizations like ours and artists to use nature as subject matter, but there has to be something more than just portraying a sunset.
I'm not really saying, you know, you should paint beautiful pictures, you know, art, landscapes or something to try to get people onto the environmental activist program or something. I'm just saying, whatever your sense of, whatever a person's aesthetic sensitivity is, heightening that, and to see if that motivates or, you know, see where that goes with that person. That's all. I know it sounds like I'm sort of saying.
No. I think we kind of there's no doubt when we do exhibitions of artwork that with a subject matter in nature, we find greater engagement in large part. I would say this is an anecdotal observational data I'm taking on my own. Like, it's not like we've actually pulled this, but looking back at the exhibitions we've done that have had that subject matter, and more specifically subject matter that's completely specific to nature, that is familiar to most of our guests who are mostly Northeast Ohioans, the interest and engagement time extends, the questions are increase, the curiosity increases, because there's a familiarity there to something that I think innately everyone believes is important, but the degree to which they're willing to let it drive their behavior is incredibly variable.
That's dropped a question there. I don't know if you've read that yet. So if you wanted to.
Yeah, what I was meaning, so what I meant by that was we're a non-collecting art museum, so we change our exhibitions every 5 months, and we are based in part on this exhibition and another one a year prior that allowed us to do a nice partnership with Cleveland Botanical Gardens. We are really like regularly programming exhibitions with content that's looking at environmental justice, nature, in a way that is, kind of carrying this content forward. And by doing that, we're able to continue nurturing relationships we're building with organizations like CELDF, rather than being like, well, this was our environmental justice season, and next season and there will be other topics. Like, admittedly, next season we're dealing with affordable housing in one of the exhibitions, so it's not necessarily, but what I mean is this is becoming a really persistent topic, and many museums are building environmental sustainability and justice into their missions, into their visions and values. Grand Rapids Art Museum, it's one of their like core focuses, so they are constantly looking at that topic. And Andrea and I have exchanged a few emails. The art world is also doing a lot of climate summits, which is ironic because like the world's biggest galleries who have the largest carbon footprint in the globe are like, how do we reduce, how can we help the climate? We're like, maybe stop shipping art to every fair every time for millions and billions of carbon. Yeah, anyway, so there's a lot of opportunity.
There's starting to be a field where there are curators of like environmentalism and climate justice, like moCa here in Los Angeles has one. There's an institution in Alaska that has one. Like, it's starting to be a title for a curator. And also the reason that the reason that Megan can make this happen is because she's the director of the museum. You know, so she's the boss. So it's amazing that somebody in Megan's position believes in taking this stuff on. Granted, she has a board of directors that has to support her in this, but you know, Megan's an amazing like leader in the field that she's doing this. So I hope this model is taken on by other institutions.
Yeah, I mean, as a great example, tomorrow, if I'm not wrong, you've got a writer named Justin Noble, who's known for his work from the Rolling Stone, who's featured community rights and rights of nature work, who now has a new book out on, you know, the deeper truth around frack waste from the hydraulic fracturing world. You know, at our art museum, CELDF will be there as well, so that kind of convergence still is continuing, you know, through the commitment to you know, provide a platform. I want to be respectful of the fact that Megan and you, Tish, are coming in from the East Coast here, and again, big day tomorrow with yet another event. So I thought we could just kind of close it out with whatever each of you want to kind of part with as far as comments, statements, reflections, questions, even for everyone
I
that's
actually have a question because I feel like there haven't been enough direct politics in this talk. I was wondering if Kai and Tish could talk about issues that they're most concerned about right now in their work. Would you two mind doing that? Like, what's on your mind right now that we should be thinking about and looking at in terms of environmentalism or whatever, social justice?
Yeah, I'll kick it off and then Tish jump in. I mean, I think it is very much what we've been talking about here tonight, which is how do you bring in the convergence of knowledge and capacity and experience and willingness, really, which I think was a bit of a reflection of what the event that took place was meant to be about. So organizationally speaking, as far as CELDF's concerned, I think our direction is to figure out how do you stitch that together for meaningful action, because we come from a very action-oriented background, and so we want to see that action piece emerge within the different communities. We've come to experience the fact that the law is very powerful, something we knew getting into it, and so its power can be very containing and constricting. And so this move now to figure out how to get outside, in some ways, the law in order to change the law is emerging in a lot of different ways that it hadn't been in the past. And so I think less so a concern, more so about anticipation and energy trying to figure that out, which means relationship building, which you guys brought up a number of times, finding alternative venues, having conversations in ways that you never thought before to see what can emerge. Because I think the understanding is there's a lot of possibility out there, including the way art can be an effective driver of all that. But there isn't a way that that's being brought together somehow. And I think the event that took place is a microcosm of what we're hoping will happen on a bigger scale. Because eventually I think it is truly about a real movement to really transform things. It's not going to come in fits and starts. I mean, that's all part of the accumulation of what that momentum will be about. But we need eventually that kind of deliberate gathering, that kind of deliberate intentional conflict in order to break through to what I think we are hoping can be on that other side. And so that has to be organized. There has to be intention. You know, to your point, Andrea, like someone has to put it together. Someone has to drive it forward. And I think that's where we sit organizationally. And I think what we've been talking about here is becoming a much more important aspect of the work we do. And so there's huge appreciation of both you, Andrea, as well as you, Megan, for the work you do, and in some ways, you know, taking the risk, which I think is a big part of what's needed in greater volume, is more and more risk.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And again, it's about the, you know, this idea again in law, like when we focus on that, it winds up usually being what, like a few plaintiffs or defendants, right? And a lawyer, and then they get sucked into that legal black hole, but for culture shift, we need a lot more of everyday people, from all walks of life, starting to question like values and morality and basic right and wrong, and not just waiting for a judge to determine those things for us. And so, I think it's so interesting, like we've talked about, the local media here hasn't really covered this very much. I mean, we've had Inside Climate News, which is a national, do the most stories on it, I think. But local doesn't cover it. And we found that with our work. That's a big problem in activism all over, not just our work, but that if the system doesn't want people to know about it, they don't cover it. And so I just keep thinking how interesting it is, like the Lake, Lake Erie, your neon that's there. So even though the media is not covering that, but then they'll cover a story about, all the forever chemicals that are in all the water that we're drinking. And so I keep thinking, if someone reads that story and then sees your neon, like that already has got to cause some kind of like shift in their thinking, right? And so I'm just like, I've gone to the museum besides the events a few times, taken, family or other people. And I'm just always, I keep wondering what those people, are they leaving and then talking to other people about what they've seen at the exhibit, whether it's the timeline or, your exhibit, some of the things you're showing or the film, and are they having conversations about this with people? And again, to me, that's the most important thing, because we're not going to create this movement if people don't have a real connection to nature. And so I think this is all helping more and more people at least make some connections and to feel some emotional connection. Because why would you want to fight to protect something that you don't have any connection to? And I found that talking to students at Case, there was that story I told you where the student said he had no connection to Lake Erie, even though he's grown up here, was born in the area and lives here now and has no connection. But he can't connect that he's drinking the water from Lake Erie and it's running through his veins. So like all of this, I think, is so important to bring more people, even though we don't know at the moment. I don't know how it's affecting them. You don't either. We can't measure it, right? It's not quantifiable, but I think it is really important when we're being shut out in so many other places within our culture and society and things right now. So keep doing it. Do another show.
Radical, we will, Tish. We're not going to stop working together. Radical patience, it's like teaching, doing this kind of work is a lot like teaching. Like you don't really know if you've had an impact. Even if you see somebody succeed, as a student, you don't know if it was you or somebody else, right? But like, over time, sometimes my work is a little tough for the art world, but over time it gets attention. I always think I have a 2-year turnaround. Like no one pays attention. Like right now we're in the shunning period. And especially Ohioans, don't say anything bad. Don't say anything if you can't say something nice. I think I was brought up on that saying. And so right now, they're all a little like shunning us a little bit. But in time, like things keep coming in. Like we got to mention during the LA Freeze Art Fair in a newspaper, like in a major art newspaper, like, and I'm talking about it all the time. It just takes longer for the art world to get it, but it'll come. But in the meantime, I think, like it's great. We've done a lot, but there's no way to know. You just have to be patient and keep going, I think.
I agree.
Megan, send us off with anything?
Oh, I don't want to be the final comment. I love the way Andrea closed. What she said.
Perfect.
Come see the show. It'll be up for 10 more days.
I think the film's on Vimeo now, maybe. We want it to play so people can
we have it on CELDF's YouTube channel as well.
The film,
Yeah.
I think, is really powerful and really important.
Yeah, for those that haven't a chance to see Andrea's film, to see some of the testimonies that we spoke about tonight, that's all on CELDF's YouTube channel. Soon there'll be other kind of videos of the event that took place in April. That'll be out as well. So as we can, we'll start churning out more examples of what transpired there in person. Again, I think as examples of what you've all been talking about here tonight. So I think with that, Andrea, Tish, Megan, thank you so much for making the time to be here and to talk through all this. I'm hoping people gain something out of our time here together tonight. Good luck tomorrow at the event with Justin Noble. Please, if you're not already on email lists for both CELDF or for the Oregon Community Rights Network, please get yourself signed up. There'll be more information, more events of this kind and others coming up in the future. So stay tuned. Thanks everyone, and have a great evening.